Good evening here at the building, and good evening at home. For those of you who are streaming this, we are going to have class here in just a moment. Just wanted to wait till a few people are seated, and then we'll have a prayer. We have lots of people in our congregation that are hurting right now, and you know who most of them are. They were announced on Sunday, so we'll have a prayer for them here just very shortly. And I see a friend of mine came in that I helped work on his house Monday, and my triceps are still sore.
You're welcome.
So, call me back. I'll come back and give him another workout. Let's bow. Lord, thank you so much for the evening that you've given us to be together and to study your word and to enjoy our fellowship in the word. Lord, there are many of our number who are hurting, who've suffered significant issues in their lives and their health and in their families, and we ask that you comfort them, be with them, and help them feel your almighty presence, especially when they feel lost and feel without hope. We ask that you energize us in support of them and help them to feel your presence at every moment. In Jesus' name, amen. So tonight we're continuing our presentation on the series of generations, and we're going to continue that and talk about generations and technology. But we are going to introduce us to you. This is Marla Lobley. Marla is librarian. Is that the right word, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, that's the old word.
Right.
Librarian at East Central University. A huge part of her job is teaching technology to people, both specific skills like how to use a mouse and how to use a computer, and critical thinking skills to help, as librarians always do, is what you're reading accurate? How do you discern whether or not something's accurate or not? Like if you look at the internet, it's a quote that about the internet from Abraham Lincoln, you know that it's probably not true. She grew up teaching her dad how to use a computer and learned very early on that your level of technical prowess does not reflect your intelligence. She used to work at a public library and saw some older people. I didn't ask her to define older. Older people who had really good tech skills and young people who didn't have any tech skills at all. And so she learned not to assume someone is technology proficient solely based on their age. And Marla, how long have you been at ECU?
4 years.
4 years. So this is Marla Lobley, my co-presenter tonight.
And you all know Colin Webb. He has served as a teacher and administrator in 4 public school districts and retired with a total of 33 years of service. He's also been a multimedia producer, president of different state technology associations, a technology director, and the director of business broadcasting. So lots of tech experience. He graduated from Oklahoma Christian University with a degree in communications and holds a master's degree in education from the University of Central Oklahoma. And he's been the executive director of Compassion Outreach for a year and a half. So we wanted to do these introductions to kind of show that we're a bit of an anomaly for our age group. Colin has a ton of tech experience, and then I have a kind of unique view of technology in my role as a librarian as a younger person.
So we're gonna, when you put that on, good, you can be the clicker. Or I can make a tone. For those of us who are older, remember. Well played. So actually, I started to talk, and it's actually Marla who will begin our slide deck.
Okay, so we have, we're going to start with the discussion. And we have some different timelines of major technology that kind of became common during each generation. So our question for each of these timelines is, how did this technology, or you could talk about other technology that was impactful for you, how did this technology that was invented during your formative years impact your life? And if you can't answer for yourself because you weren't part of this generation, maybe think about your parents or your kids. So for the silent generation, how did having the refrigerator, the radio, and duct tape impact your life or your parents' life?
refrigerator, well, everything had to either be canned or it rotted. You had fresh or you didn't have because you couldn't, and then it, well, they had some preservatives and ice, but it was probably hard to get. Probably not everybody had some access to it. I don't know.
And how many people know how to can now?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a few people. But, you know, instead of everyone in this room raising their hand, there's just one.
My parents had starting out before the refrigerator, they had a device, a box called an ice box. And the ice man would come around every few days so as to replace the ice, so as to keep things cold.
Yes.
My grandparents never called it the refrigerator. It was always the ice box.
Ice box,
Yeah.
huh? Today it's an ice chest.
Okay, what about baby boomers? We have rotary phones, television, and space flight. How did that impact you?
Rotary phone, do you mean the dial thing?
Yes, the spin dial.
Well, I remember I used to pick up the phone and she wasn't my sister-in-law at the time, but she said, "Who are you calling?" Oh, I said, "Because you had to call the number." They had
A switchboard.
switchboard.
Yes.
The ADA switchboard was on the corner of Rennie and Main. On the second floor, that was Southwestern Bell telephone.
So that
Switchboard.
would be a lot less privacy than what we, right? That's a huge change.
Well, my grandmother's phone was if you wanted to reach her, you had to do 3 longs and a short.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we went to college, you didn't call home like you could call home now on your cell phone. Because it was a switchboard and because long distance costs a lot of money. So if you were in Oklahoma City and you were calling Ada, you weren't going to do that very often because it's too expensive.
So that required you to be more independent.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same thing when you're driving. Mark and I had a bag phone. And of course, that's long past this, but I mean, you just didn't break down the calls so much. But I remember watching, cartoons only came on Saturday, and we had a black and white TV when I was little. But we got a color. That was big time. And the space flight, I was fucking it today, but in the 60s though, but that impacted education hugely. Teachers all know about space flight.
I remember our first television, it was 9 inches on the diagonal.
Yep. Okay, Generation X. We have jet engines, portable defibrillators, and microwaves. This is actually a picture of Colin and Jana's first microwave. It cost a lot of money back then, whereas now, you know, they're just $25, $50. But how did these things impact you, Generation X?
Well, we had to cook for my dad all the time, and so my mom wanted one, so he got it, and it sat there, and we hardly ever used it because my dad still he didn't like it.
Okay.
So we were like, but it's really quick, and he was like, nope, I don't want that, it tastes like cardboard, so he wouldn't let us use it, so.
Yeah. So, you know, nothing new under the sun. We're going to talk about that later, but,
It gave a whole new meaning to the word, the phrase "zap it."
yeah. So it changed our language. Some of the older generation just outright rejected it because it was new and different.
I'm a Generation X, and one thing that's not listed on there that made a big difference, I think, in a lot of people were the VCR, because suddenly you could see a movie, you know, anytime you wanted, and it used to be a big deal to, like, you know, Christmas specials would come on, and you had to be sitting in front of the TV to see it, and in the theater when I was a kid, you know, if Cinderella came out of the theater or whatever, you couldn't watch it at home. Your mom took you to see those things. That was a big treat and something special, but the VCR really started, and of course now it's streaming anything, anytime, but that was my dad bought a VCR when I was a teenager, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks for bringing that up. Millennials, we've got the Sony Walkman and personal computers, the World Wide Web, and eBay. I know for me, that's the whole reason my dad wanted to learn how to use a computer was for eBay. And so he called me his personal secretary, and I taught him how to turn the computer on and make a post, upload a picture, all of that. Any other notes for millennials?
I think, along with the World Wide Web, the creation of chat rooms, like, you know, people may remember those or not, but like I remember, like actually finding a Chinese student and talking to them. I think I was early high school, and they were getting ready to take like their high school entrance exam, and basically if they failed it, they were gonna kill themselves because like it was a shady culture, and I just thought that was the weirdest thing. And like talking to all my friends, I was like, dude, that's so weird. But just like, you know, all of a sudden, we weren't just talking with people locally. We were able to reach out and touch people across the world.
Yes, so that would give you a very different perspective. If you grow up having relationships and friendships with people from different countries and different cultures, and your parents haven't had that opportunity unless they've been in the military or something. But yeah, that's chat rooms that's a good point.
The internet has taught us that stupidity is not caused by a lack of information.
Yes. Okay, in Gen Z, we have Wi-Fi, which is wireless internet, iPod and iPhone, and the iPad. I see Daly nodding. Any comments on Generation Z?
My first phone was actually, it was a flip phone. It was a Motorola Razr. And all my friends had texting, but I didn't have that yet. And so I would sit in class and I would pretend to text my friends during class so that I could fit in. And they wouldn't know that I didn't have it. But it was really neat being able to, you know, call my parents when I was out with my friends. The disadvantage is it was another thing that could be taken away from me for punishment. So I don't know that I really had it that much, but it was yeah.
Yeah, so some of those things that we mentioned earlier, like you had to have more independence when you didn't have a cell phone. Gen Z, that's totally out the window. Like you always have a cell phone.
But I don't know how parents, you know, I asked my mom, how did you make it through me driving as a teenager and not being able to get a hold of me? All three of my girls had a cell phone, not necessarily an iPhone, but they had some sort of device where if I needed to get a hold of them, I could.
Yes. Same with privacy. You know, a rotary phone with a switchboard. You don't have privacy. These Generation Z are used to privacy all the time on their devices. They're used to connecting with people that they've never seen before all the time because of devices. And then Alpha Generation, this is kind of what's happening with technology now. And honestly, I had to Google these words to find out what they mean. But nanotechnology is like technology that's at the atomic level. So like you could have technology in the fabric that you're wearing. A quantum computer can solve problems faster than a regular computer. So you can give a quantum computer a problem that a regular computer can't solve within a person's lifetime. And the quantum computer can solve it. And then a neural network is like an artificial intelligence that is set up kind of like the neurons in our brain, where it can learn from its own mistakes. So you can imagine, we've kind of seen some changes coming over the generations. These are huge changes. And so we're talking tonight about, we wanted for you to reflect on your own experiences with technology, so that even if you think, oh, I have nothing to do with technology in my life, it's impacting your life somehow. It's impacting the lives of the people you love. And so we just wanted to help you start thinking about your own relationship with technology. So we're going to segue into a discussion and some points that Colin will make on, is any invention in history inherently good or bad? So just kind of ponder that question, and Colin will take over.
Thank you. Is any invention in history inherently good or bad? Well, good and bad are basically, in this context, morality words. Good or evil, they're morality words. And so it bears giving a great deal of thought to that, because technology permeates our life, and who knows what the technology will be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. The book that was referenced in Ben's lesson makes 3 pretty important points. 1, anything that's in the world when you're born is normal and ordinary. You grew up with it, it's fine with you, because it's always been part of your reality. Anything invented between 15 and 35, that's pretty cool. It's exciting. It's new. You can get a career in it. I was a first-generation technology director in schools. There was no degree in technology the way we understand it now. I was a video producer, and it was, you've got all kinds of wires and gizmos in a room that's dark and cold and full of all this gear. Why don't you do it? When video production and technology have nothing to do with each other, at least at that stage. And number 3, anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order. Even though I'm a technology director, there are still times when I'm going, oh, wait a minute, back in my day, the first time I caught myself saying that, oh my goodness, here I am. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to take a look at biblical perspectives on technology as well. Is technology good? Genesis 1:28, you may recall, is the mandate given, be fruitful and multiply, subdue the earth, rule over it. And yet, then you have technology developed by ungodly people. Remember Tubal-Cain? There's got to be a song somewhere. There's Reuben James, there may be a song called Tubal-Cain. In Genesis 4, who forged tools out of bronze and iron, and to refresh your memory, Tubal-Cain was a descendant of Cain, Cain being the one who killed his brother, without technology, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Noah built an ark. There's technology for you, gopher wood, a cubit. But his descendants built the Tower of Babel. And so we'll do just a couple more. Exodus 31 and 35, and technology and craftsmanship are used to glorify God. The Lord said to Moses, see, I've chosen Bezalel, I'm sure I mispronounced that, son of Uri, son of Hur, tribe of Judah, filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom and understanding and knowledge, with skills to make artistic designs of gold, silver, and bronze, cut stones and set them, woodwork, and all kinds of crafts. But then in Chronicles, we have Uzziah, who made shields and spears and armor and bows and weapons of war, and he became famous. He was a servant of God, became famous, and it went to his head, and he entered the temple to burn incense on the altar when he was not supposed to do that. That's the priest's job, and the priest came in and said, you're not supposed to do this, and he got mad and was starting to wring them out, and God struck him with leprosy such that while he's ranting and raving at the priests, leprosy comes out, it begins to be apparent on his forehead. He had to leave, obviously, the temple, and he had to sequester himself where the leprosy got worse, and he died. So, technology can be used for good and evil, but ultimately it's inert. It's really common in our culture right now to say, to have in mind that there's a cause and effect relationship or a causal relationship between two things that might not necessarily be there. Ben makes the point in one of his slides, and I love this because you look at the top and there are all these people sitting on their cell phones not paying attention to each other, and you look at the bottom and there's all these people on a bus or a subway reading their newspapers and not paying attention to one another. People will use whatever tools that they have to do what they want to do. And I'm going to quote this verbatim: the existence of technology has consequences but does not cause anything. Does not cause anything. Technology is inert. If A is making people B, if A is some kind of technology, this sentence will be false. Technology is an instrument. It can't make someone do anything. And we have a couple of examples. Guns are making people violent. Guns are an instrument. They have no will or power of causation or independent will. So the statement's false because that gun just sitting there, it doesn't care. It doesn't have good or evil in it. It is an inert object. If someone is bound and determined to do someone harm, as is evidenced with Cain and Abel, they'll find a way to do it. And in Genesis 6, all flesh had corrupted their way on earth, and that's an artist rendering. If I had a picture of Cain killing Abel, you'd be able to, as a librarian, go, that can't be true. That's humor. This is an artist rendering. It's not a photograph. Moving quickly. Birth control. Birth control is making people promiscuous. Again, it's an instrument. It doesn't have any power, a causal power. And this has been sentence, and I love it. People aren't doing anything they didn't want to do in the first place. Cain wanted to kill Abel. Whatever you want to do, you'll find a way to do it with the tools that are available. Whether it's good or ill, you'll find a way to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So saying that this causes this, where technology or an inanimate object or something inert is concerned, is a false statement. And we need to, it's because of, by extension, if you're blaming this inert object for evil, well then that kind of takes the human element out of it, takes the human off the hook. And they're no longer responsible for what they do. I was reflecting an old comedy show that Marlon knows nothing about, but some of you will. Remember Nipsey Russell, The Devil Made Me Do It? You know, well, it was the devil. It was not this inert object. So, and as an example, I pulled this up. This is, I won't read all of this to you, but this is, it's called The Stranger's Guide, Frauds of London. And then if you read the fine print, it's talking about if you go to a brothel and you're likely to get beat up and get your money stolen from you, and this was published in 1808. So, you know, evil has existed in the world and people are going to do what they're going to do regardless of the time. And as Marla talked about, we're going to get to that from a biblical standpoint here in just a moment.
Okay, so hopefully after that, when you see this picture, your first thought is not technology is making us antisocial. Or when you walk into a room and young people are on their phones, your first thought is not technology is making us antisocial. So all the statements that Colin said can be made about cell phones. And it's not just isolated and antisocial. It could be anything, right? Cell phones are making people obsessed with privacy. They're making people less independent. Whatever, fill in the blank. They are just an instrument. They are not causing anything. It's how we're using them that's causing different things. So when we wanted to give you an image so that when you see people and you're like, I still think that technology is making us antisocial. Think about when television first came out and how it's not the tool. If they weren't watching television in this picture, they would all be reading a newspaper or something. Like humans are just going to do what they want to do. Ann Landers. Who was she again?
She was an advice columnist.
She was, that's right. She was the sister of Dear Abby, but obviously y'all already knew that. It was just the three of us that did. She wrote that television has proved that people will look at anything rather than each other. Not quite the same as saying that television has caused this. It's just saying television is showing us this about ourselves. And then Nicholas Johnson, FCC chairman, said, all television is educational television. The question is, what is it teaching? And you could really say the same thing about any media, whether it's news or a newspaper or social media. All media is teaching you something.
And that's a really excellent point, that what this all begins to come down to is the appropriate use of media, the appropriate use of technology. It's what you do with it that makes it for good or for ill. Because we're all teaching or being taught in most circumstances in life. So one of the things that Marla and I decided to do was to have one generation talk to the other. And so we're having 10 between us, but mine is 5 things that older generations wish younger generations knew about how we feel about technology. Just because we sometimes struggle with technology, we aren't stupid. We were good at using the technology of our formative years. I've been waiting to ask this question. How many people in the room know what that and that is? Well, you're not supposed to know that. You're young. Yeah, the carburetor and what else, Ronnie?
A set of points.
Set of points. And for those of you other than Nolan and younger generations, you had to, those were on your engine. And unless you could afford a mechanic, you did your own carburetor kits, you changed the floats when you had to, you set the timing, you set the points, and you knew how many degrees past 12 o'clock you had to set this engine to make it work right. I actually still own a Quadrajet, a Rochester Quadrajet, because it was on my 68 Impala Custom that had a 396 rat in it. And I thought, if I ever have a big block Chevy again, I'm going to want that carburetor. I still have it. I've never bought another car that would fit on it. But now I raised the hood on my 16 Silverado and got to go, there's an engine. Call the mechanic. Because I can't work on it. I can't work on it. You used to see the technology required to even work on an engine now. Treadle sewing machine. My grandmother had one, watched her use it. Couldn't believe she didn't get herself stuck with it. A computer on the left. I had to explain this to Marla. That's a Trash 80. She said, did they really call it trash? It was a TRS, a Tandy Radio Shack. It was a TRS 80. And it was nicknamed Trash because of TRS. We got the first one, we had at Francis Tuttle Votech, my first job out of college in about 1983 or something like that, 84. And we had one, and we sent one of the administrative assistants to California for 3 weeks to learn how to use it. And when she got back, a memo went out that says, you can't touch this on pain of termination. And by the time I left Francis Tuttle, about 6 years later, we all had computers on our desks. Like an IBM AT, dual floppy drives. And I'm talking about 5 1/4. Big floppy drives. Okay, this, how many people know what that is? Yeah, punch card. My freshman year of college. I'm online, I'm not going to say her name. Girl I dated was a secretarial science major, is what they called it then. She sent me a love note that was actually about 30 or 40 of these cards stacked together, and you had to go through and read each one of them to figure out what she was telling you.
You had to have a reader, don't you?
Pardon?
Had to have a reader to put it in.
Pretty much, yes. So, number 2, be patient with us. Remember, you grew up with this stuff, younger generation. We didn't. So it's second nature to you. It's not second nature to us, or at least for most of us. Number 3, some of the dangers we see in tech are real. Don't ignore our advice just because we didn't grow up with it. I've got a whole different presentation I do on cyberbullying and the use of social media and how its irresponsible use is incredibly destructive to relationships, has been the way people have treated other people on social media has resulted in suicides, and where the technology didn't cause it, but how people used it caused it. And it's a very, very serious issue. Sometimes words have different meanings depending on one's generation. If you look at someone who's in their 80s or 90s and they're not technology conversant, you say swipe your card, they're going to look at you like, you want me to steal a card? You want me to swipe a card? Because words mean different things. We talked about Zap. Zap back in the day, I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and in the dining room, we had bug zappers. You're in there eating your crispy thigh, and you're, oh, that was a red one. And those my vintage remember that. And I was telling Marla, she said, in the dining room? Yeah, one of my jobs is to get a ladder after hours and go clean the sucker out. Yeah. We have all these words that mean different things, like a cookie. Well, you got a bad cookie, you need to clear your cache. Cookie and cache. Are these Girl Scout cookies? So words mean different things. And number 5, communication is a two-way street. We will try to learn how to communicate in ways and integrate that accommodate younger generations. Please allow us the same courtesy. Don't assume, as Marla talked about, don't assume that we know what you're talking about when you say mouse. My brother, and I do hope he's watching, I'm his tech guy. And he is very smart, he's exceedingly intelligent, and I can't tell you how many times he's called me and said, okay, I scanned a picture on my computer, now I can't find it. And if I get the least bit impatient with him, he reminds me that he is a very, retired now, very skilled auto mechanic. And that when I have trouble with my cars, I call him. So be patient. Both generations need each other as we learn how to responsibly use and effectively use technology.
And I talked to some of the young adults about what 5 things they wish the older generations knew. And this was the first thing that everyone said was something to the effect of social media is not private. Now, the platforms want you to think it's private. They want you to think that you can set your privacy settings and only your family and friends will see what you post. But anything that appears on a screen, someone can take a screenshot, which means they just take a picture of it. It takes like 2 buttons on their phone. They take a picture of it, and then even if you take that post down, they have the photo of it, and they can share that widely. So you don't want to say anything on social media that you wouldn't say to someone face to face or that you wouldn't say in a public space. And it also 100% impacts how people perceive you and everything you're a part of. So it is not an exaggeration at all from someone in my generation to not want to go to church at Central because they saw something ugly someone posted on social media and they know they go to church at Central. Like, it's just automatically, they have so many choices in churches. Why would they go somewhere where people are posting ugly things on social media? So we want you to be aware that social media can be deceptive. Same thing goes for text messages. You can screenshot a text message and share it widely. So if you need to say something confidential, like it better be over a phone call. Don't do it over text. The second is along the lines of social media as well, but to set the example. So you might see people ranting on Facebook or oversharing or engaging in these long political debates. That does not mean that's what Facebook is for. In my opinion, Facebook is for pictures of kids and pets. But so we ask to do things according to your own wisdom and discernment instead of following the crowd and doing what you see other people do. And if there's someone posts something and you really want to respond in the comments, you can always message that person individually. You can reach out and text them, you can call them, just reach out to them in a more private way than on social media. Technology can offer some real solutions to problems. So at some point in your family, at your work, in church, someone may propose a solution that involves technology, and your instant reaction will be like, that's against the natural order of things. No. I would ask that you consider it. Now, definitely help us think through the unintended consequences of that. Use your reflection on your time with technology and how it's impacted your life, and bring up those unintended consequences. Bring up any other possible issues you see, because we may know some workarounds. So instead of just saying a flat no, have a discussion and see if the technology can solve some problems.
One of the things that's interesting about that part that you're talking about, the kids working on the laptop there, it's interesting because in a way technology has made a generation of younger people mentally deficient in a way, because they become too mentally deficient, dependent on the technology rather than on the mental part of it.
I don't know if I would say deficient, but different.
Different, yes.
So,
different.
like technology, especially tablets where you can navigate by pictures, that's helping kids learn to read faster. That's a reading skill to identify a symbol with a specific meaning.
But on the mathematical skills, it makes them a little bit more dependent on particularly multiplication, divisions, and other mathematical principles, which older generations thought those things out, and they could look at them and manipulate sometimes much faster than someone with a calculator.
My papa was a farmer and could calculate all kinds of things in his head. He was also obsessed with always having the newest gadget, and then getting his grandkids to come out and use it for him. He didn't want to learn how to use it. He just wanted us to use it and be impressed.
Well, I understand my 5-year-old great-granddaughter can do things with a phone I can't.
Right. And kids now, a lot of kids know coding, and that is a fantastic math skill, to be able to code and program something into a computer. The fourth thing is that everyone needs boundaries. Anyone of any age can become addicted to technology, any kind of technology, not just digital stuff, or use social media foolishly. So if you have young children in your life, help them set boundaries, or set boundaries for them if they're young enough, about their technology usage. If they're older children or teens, help them set their own boundaries. Help them reflect on how technology is impacting their life and what boundaries they need. Do they really need their cell phone in their bedroom so they can text or talk all night? Help them consider their own boundaries. Consider your boundaries and encourage your peers to have boundaries. The Center for Humane Technology has a whole list of things you can do if you think you're addicted to social media, things that you can do to make the platform less addictive for you. And then the TechWise Family is a book that is written from a Christian perspective about how to set technology boundaries within your family. And if you need help remembering either one of those resources, just ask me. I always have them on top of my head because I love them. And number 5 is you're not going to break it. So I've seen a lot of people get really stressed out and frustrated with technology because they think it's going to just break if they do one thing wrong. And that may have been true in the early days with the Trash 80, but now you're only going to break it if you do something like that to it. So just clicking around and experimenting, you're not going to break your smartphone doing that. And the more you learn about it, the more you're going to be open to it, and you'll have like a whole new world opened up for you. And the more, it's easier to mistrust something that you don't understand. So the less you understand, the more you mistrust it, and aren't going to be willing to let it have a positive impact on your life, because it definitely can. I mean, think about COVID. We had a year of isolation. How cool would it be to be able to video call your grandkids or your family? And so that's what we want technology to be used for, is those types of connections.
You know, one of the things that she's talking about, that you can't break it, and I sat here and thought, well, that's because they made it hard to get to a seed prompt. But if you get to a seed prompt, okay, anybody in the room know what a seed? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You know, because there's little asterisk things you can put after a seed prompt. But the technology has improved so much that now you kind of have to want to break it, you know. So that was not to contend with that, but as a tech director, I'm always going, okay, wait, unintended consequence. You can't, if you get to a C prompt, there's problems. Anyway, that's not in the script. Can you tell? Our conclusions. Using technology requires wisdom. You really need to have discernment. We could go off for an hour about social media and how you can argue with people you don't know online and the needle doesn't move, and all you've done is raise your blood pressure and probably alienate people who are on the sidelines watching you say things. Probably, if your blood pressure goes up, you're probably saying them in such a way that it's off-putting to people, especially if they find out or you've said that you're a believer. Old people need younger people to show how to use technology. And so that we can take advantage of that technology, both for ourselves and in the practice of our kingdom building. And young people need older people to show them how to make use of technology, how to communicate effectively with it, what works, what doesn't, the unintended consequences that Marlon talked about.
And I'm going to read this from Ecclesiastes 1:9-11. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. And so we began with this discussion about how people's use of technology impacts our lives in different ways across history. And then moved on to technology is not the problem. It's just a tool. And people using technology inappropriately is the problem. And to put this another way is when you have that reaction of this is new, I hate this, think about your dad in the microwave. You know, how did your parents react to the technology of your generation?
Or as the older generation might say it, the thing that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which has been done, and there is no new thing under the sun. I just said what she said with parchment and the King's English.
And then from Micah 6:8, he has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So technology can be used in a lot of different ways, but as with everything, just do what you're already doing, and acting justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly with your God. And the digital world is no different from the physical one in what God requires of us.
Marla is the one that chose that scripture, but I love Micah 6:8. If we could just pull everything that we do, you know, if you want to boil it down to your essentials, we could just do those three before we think about how we do anything, including technology, probably be a lot better off. So that's our lesson. What questions or observations would you have? We have some time left.
That last scripture you did sound like Dr. Seuss to me.
Makes me want to go home and rewrite Green Eggs and Ham in King's English. I better tell a funny anecdote about us, about technology. She said she was going to, when we first were going to do this, she put together the first draft of the PowerPoint. Said, I'll send it to you. Well, I thought she'd drop it in Google Dropbox, Google Docs, and so I could just use that. And so I did that, and I pulled it down on my computer and made changes, and then I couldn't figure out how to upload it in what she was using, because it wasn't Google, it wasn't Gdocs, it wasn't Dropbox, and so I just emailed it to her. And she very politely basically said, you couldn't make those changes on what I sent you in that portal, and I would have gotten them. So we kind of had a big laugh over that, and I said, well, if you want to teach me how to do that, I'd be glad to do that. And she said, why don't you just email it to me?
Well, I have a question here that knows how to sync your smartphone to your smart TV. Please show me.
I retired just in time to not have to do that.
Tom, I can ask you later what exactly you mean by sync, and yeah, we can walk through that. When I was at the public library in Missouri, it was this town of 4,000 people, maybe 3,000. It was small, and I would get identified in the grocery store as the Okie tech girl. And people were bringing all kinds of devices into the library that I had never seen before and asked me how to use them. And I was like, I don't know, let's Google it. And I'm on my phone Googling how to do this thing on this really old Kindle. And, it was a lot of fun. So, and I don't do that part particular a whole lot now. So if you have questions, like you want to connect with your family that's a long distance away and you want to learn how to use FaceTime or Zoom or whatever, I'd love to show you that. If you have an idea for how to reach people in a missions way with technology, I'm happy to show you how to do that. Or just, sync your smartphone with your TV. So.
We have a recent example about how we can make assumptions about technology use. As a first-generation tech director, I started doing a research early on about screen time and about how screen time can impact behavior, especially in children. And those of you who have been in education know that there are various learning domains, and children learn differently, and there are basically categories, and I won't launch off into that, except to say that with the pandemic, and suddenly we were doing so much remote learning, or in my day we called it distance learning, there was a grand assumption made that, all children can learn looking at a Chromebook or looking at an iPad as effectively as they can with a live teacher in the room. And all of us old hands said, not a chance, because we knew better. Trained educators knew better. Now, the pandemic forced us to go that direction, because having inferior education is better than no education at all. Some kids just glommed onto it and did great, because in the way they learned, they were able to adapt to it, especially those who had just, from the cradle with it. But some students didn't do well with that. And those of you who are teachers in the room, or are still practicing teachers, you know that to be true, that some students don't do well with that. And it can be for a variety of reasons. And so one of the takeaways about technology, whatever the solution technology provides, there is nothing that is a one-size-fits-all solution to anything. It's like presenting like this. There are some people that they don't like to interact. I have a family member of mine that when they go to a class, they don't want to talk. They want to sit there and take notes. That's their mind style. That's the way they learn. And there are other people that want that and need that interaction because it helps them learn, it helps them process information. So whatever the technology, always be mindful of, okay, this might work for this subset of my audience, but will it work for that subset? And how do I address that? Remember the big controversy when we first started having songs on PowerPoint? What, you've got a screen in your auditorium? Well, that's just not right. We can't have PowerPoint. Are you kidding me? And I remember those controversies. And then I was on the other side of the fence when, okay, we're going to start putting songs up there. And the first time I saw that, and I thought, we're going to just have the lyrics. And if it's a new song and I don't have the music, I'm not singing, because I got nothing to hang my hat on. I can't figure this out. And there was a big controversy. Do we put the notes on the screen or don't we put the notes on the screen? And there was a big hullabaloo about that in our brotherhood for a while. And now, I defy you to go, I haven't seen a church in the last 15 years that you walk in and they don't have a screen. But if you go back and look up on our stage, if you go back to that back rail right where the baptistry is, if you look down in there, there are not one, there are 2 chalkboards that you can lift up on a pulley system, because at one point someone thought it'd be good to have a chalkboard in here when we're doing Bible classes. That was new at some point, and I wasn't here when they did it, but I guarantee it caused problems for some people because it was new, it was different. But go back up there and look, you'll see it. Look down in there and go, gum wrappers. Oh, there's 2 chalkboards down in there. Some of you who were here before this building was built probably saw those being used. Any other questions or observations?
I was thinking about social media, that one of the, I think one of the young to old was, remember that that's public, you know, what you're saying. And that's certainly important if I say something on my Facebook that anything I say on my Facebook is going to reflect on, like, she lives in this community, she goes to this church and stuff. But I think that the different generations can be kind of sensitive about different things. Like I see, you know, someone's grandson puts a picture up of their football game, and then underneath it's like, oh, Grandma loves you, aren't you cute? You know, and you know that they aren't real thrilled that Grandma, you know, came and commented on their beast picture. But it kind of goes, like, older people get sensitive about other, you know, privacy things. Like sometimes, you know, this happened in my family. My mother died a few years ago, and younger people from her church were putting it on media before we told everybody in the family. You know, so somebody's family member calls up and says, "Did your mom pass away?" And yeah, just a little bit ago. Well, so and so saw it on Facebook, and you know, so I don't know. I think that the generations can be different.
I think so.
I think you can say that either way.
It's starting to come a little bit full circle. I did a presentation at a 4,000 level education class at my alma mater last year, and I knew the instructor, so I asked for a class roster, and I did what younger generations call snooping, or not snooping, but trolling, not trolling. And so as part of my presentation, I looked at all their profiles, and about half of them had no security settings at all on their Facebook accounts. So I just started talking, and I picked one because she had a guy who I thought was her boyfriend named Colin. So I keyed in on that. And so I just started saying, oh, well, you know, and I can't remember her name, but so-and-so and Colin, and they had just a great time, and I can just tell that she really likes this guy, and blah, blah, blah. And I did that with a couple or 3 students, and the class starts laughing. And then I said, so, where are you, Melanie, or whatever her name was? And she raised her hand, and she said, Colin's my husband. But I followed up with the professor a couple of weeks later, and she said it got their attention. And she said about half of them have already deleted their Facebook pages because they're creating this digital footprint that once the expression is digital never dies. And I gave them examples of how someone put on social media 4 years ago, 10 years ago, could rise up and cause them all kinds of problems. Is that fair? No. Is it just? No. Is it reality? Yes. And so I think that there's a lot of, as this technology, that particular technology matures and we become much more aware of those kinds of things, then the wisdom about how to use it appropriately can accompany that, at least to use it in such a way that it doesn't have the potential to negatively impact you 10, 15, 20 years from now. And Jaylee knows that. She does this for a living. This is a career that didn't exist 10 years ago. You know, how do you manage you manage your company's social media footprint? Other questions, comments?
I think you have to throw in there too, the fake profiles that are out there.
Oh, yes.
That are trying to be people's friends, and there's nothing about their profile that is true, accurate, or it's all for deception.
At fake profiles, and that made me think, Mark mentioned that there are a lot of people with fake profiles and they're just trying to get information out of you, and it made me think this too. A lot of people, you know, if they go beyond their grandkids and their pets on social media, and most people, not all, but a lot of people on social media, they only put the positive stuff on there. So if you're reading that and your life's a train wreck for some reason or another, you're looking at that going, everybody's life is good but mine. How depressing, you know? And then you have people that put stuff on there that go, that's really depressing. You know, and it just exposes the human condition and the human emotions that run the gambit. It could be that someone passed away or someone, and it can be used for positive. We have a member here who's facing a very serious illness. We have several, actually. And they're using that as a positive on social media to follow and to say, not only here's how I'm doing, but here's how I'm approaching this, and using it very, in a way that's transparent for building the kingdom, which is really good. Other comments, because I'm doing all the talking now, and so Marla, feel free to say anything you'd like to say.
Well, I just have one final thought. You know, it's easy to think about all the bad ways that you can use technology, but there's lots of good ways you can use it too. And I think there's a lot of young people who are using it for good. So it may seem rude that someone's like texting you while they're waiting, or texting while they're waiting for church to start, or they're on their phone or something. They might be tweeting that, hey, they're at church, here's the scripture. Like, they may be doing something good with it. So I don't want anyone to come out of this and like every time they see someone using the technology, they're like, oh, bad. You know, there's a lot of good that can be done with it.
Can I tell one of myself about that? Back when we were at Edmond Church, it was just 15 years ago, I got invited to teach a high school class one week. And that was my exposure to a Bible app. I didn't know. I start teaching, and there's a kid sitting right there, whips out his cell phone, and I felt my blood pressure go up, and I thought, how incredibly rude. If this were my classroom at school, but I thought, obviously not time or place, I just kept going, and as it turns out, the kid was reading his Bible. That was the first time I saw anyone read their Bible on their phone, and it was kind of like, I need to not make that assumption when I see phones come out. And now, you know, not many of us carry Bible. Now, I love to still flip through the pages, but if I'm sitting here in a class and, oh, what's that scripture? I'm pulling up my phone. BibleGateway.com? Hey, they've got the King James Version. Yeah. Other comments? Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your participation and attendance.